stage, on stage with Jim and Tom. 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 Tom and Jim.
Tonight we welcome North Bay Punk's B Ward to the stage of the Phoenix Theater. This is a band that plays a blend of 80s-style death rock, anarcho-punk, and goth, and was formed late last year. Tonight we'll get to know the people behind the music, what they've channeled into that music, and later they will play that very music. Please welcome to the program B Ward.
B Ward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anarcho-punk. This is a term that you use to describe yourselves. Could you describe what that music's all about, like the mindset behind that music? Because it's more than just music that's being played. There's a philosophy, a worldview, stuff that is representative of the beliefs of the people that play it.
I think it's kind of about carrying your own weight and taking care of what you need to yourself. And if everybody just kind of did that on their own, everything would work out. But unfortunately, people kind of steal from each other, and they're greedy and need to kind of exploit other things in order to get their own way. So I think anarcho-punk is more just about doing it yourself.
You play anarcho-punk, and that leads me to believe that the idea of anarchy is appealing to you. And so I'm curious, what aspect of anarchy is appealing to you guys?
Just freedom from oppression, really. Just freedom from cultural oppression, political oppression, and artistic oppression. Yeah. That's something that I have felt throughout the time that I've always been playing music. It's something that I have felt that I've wanted to break free from for the entire time that I've been going to shows, enjoying music, listening to it. Ever since I was a little kid, that's something that has always really appealed to me because it expressed freedom and it expressed power. Individual power for the person and not for the people, really, and not individuals to take that power and exploit it. That's the most important thing for me.
Do you mind if I follow up? You feel like you've experienced it before. How has it kind of crept into your life? People kind of trying to dictate what you can and cannot say and the sort of music that you play. Is that what you mean?
To an extent, yeah. Mostly just people trying to tell you that you're not good enough or trying to tell you that you can't do certain things with your music or with your band. More so just the feeling of you can do whatever you want and you can express yourself any way that you feel. That's always been really important to me, and I feel like that's important to all of us.
I really feel it's about autonomy. If I'm not mistaken, if you look at what the anarchy symbol means, the A in the circle, that's autonomy within solidarity. Mm-hmm. So, you can have autonomy with your music, with your way of life, with your speech, with the way that you think, the way that you want things in your life to go. So really it's having that autonomy without outside influences telling you what it should be, societal norms or things like that affecting the way that you live your life or the music that you write and the things that you do on the day-to-day.
You had mentioned that there have been some figures from the world of anarcho-punk that appealed to you, and I'm curious if anybody has anybody that they want to share in terms of from the 70s onward that was inspiring to you.
For me, I think Rebel Ballet is one that I would say definitely carries the whole entire essence of anarchy. They did everything themselves, everything from making their own instruments to hand-wiring their own amps to just putting out the message that no one can control you. No one should tell you whether you're good enough or you should be here or anything like that. You are human on this planet and you deserve the right to live just like everyone else. No one should have more than you. No one should have, take anything away from you. Yeah.
Nick Blinko, huge.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely, because not only with his music, but he does have a fairly extensive psychiatric history for which he was admitted to facilities.
Which band was he in?
He's the singer of Rudimentary Peni, and also he's a visual artist and did some really, really weird shit. He kind of helped start this whole outsider art movement, for which he has a gallery called the Henry Boxer Gallery, and a lot of his art is just kind of twisted and bizarre and not really well accepted, kind of way ahead of its time when he was initially doing that.
Especially for the UK.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, it was the weirdest art out there.
And then that kind of sums up the like DIY side, where it's like you don't, what your art is does not have to be fit for public consumption.
Yeah.
It can be whatever you want it to be.
Exactly.
And that's an important thing for the individual and also just for pushing boundaries. And that doesn't even get into like the idea of like activism and direct action, which is another big part of this genre.
Exactly.
I have the Wikipedia entry open for it right here. And I'll read a few of them in a second. But Tom, you brought up on a previous episode that like the people who choose to live on the streets, that's a form of anarchy.
Yeah, it is a form of anarchy.
They're choosing to not participate. Very difficult.
Yeah, it's a difficult lifestyle. But some of my friends that live on the streets here in Petaluma, absolutely, it's a choice that they make. And quite frankly, and you hear a lot of negative about them. But I know several that live on the streets that do not use food stamps. And make their way quite nicely on their own. Thank you very much, as it were. And that's a wonderful form of anarchy if you can do that.
So freedom from judgment is an important thing, I'm assuming, because judgment is a form of oppression, I would say.
You know what it is? It's not freedom of judgment or freedom of other people's opinions, because you're always going to get that. It's freedom to say "fuck you."
It's not giving a fuck about their opinion.
Yeah, it's not giving a fuck, and it's an important
Very well
freedom.
said.
I was interested to read this list of examples of direct action, because some of these things you wouldn't even think of them as being political, but it's like refusal of work, squatting, economic sabotage. Well, that sounds political. Dumpster diving, graffiti, culture jamming, freeganism, boycotting, civil disobedience, etc. It's funny to look at it through that lens, because I bet there's a lot of people out there who wouldn't see a person who's choosing to live on the street, say, and think, oh, that's a person who's making a decision because they don't want to be a part of the mechanism of society.
Yeah.
Instead, what you get is just a lot of negativity about that. So it's interesting to kind of switch the lens out and try to like step away from how society looks at things.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a very important thing to do if this is a worldview that you subscribe to.
Sure.
Absolutely.
I think everybody kind of daydreams about life off of a clock, not having to fucking go work for some asshole boss. And that's kind of like having to have the ideal way of having a primitive lifestyle where you can grow your own food, build your own house, and just take care of shit yourself, coming back to just doing everything on your own. Sounds awesome, I mean, like Henry David Thoreau, went out and did that, but he wasn't perfect. It's hard to break free from these chains that fucking government and culture and just society puts on you to grow up, start a family, have kids, move on with your life. You're
It's ingrained
27
into
years
us.
old.
It's ingrained into us from a very early age.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's damn near impossible to break free from it. And you mentioned Thoreau. Even Thoreau, went back to his mom's house.
Exactly.
And did his laundry.
Yeah. That's totally what I meant by that. And it's at least making an effort to do that, especially in today's world. That was a while ago, but still, you have to do something about it. You have to try to move towards breaking free,
Do you feel like even now where things seem worse than they did previously, do you feel like we're moving in the direction in the world where this is becoming more feasible, or do you feel like it's becoming less feasible?
I'd like to think so. Some days I think that it is moving towards that, and then I read back on other times where people were making more of an effort to be active. And I think we really need to revert back to it, especially in the punk scene. There's kids going out there buying the t-shirts, buying the records, they're doing the thing, but they don't, if something's fucked up in the world, they're like, oh, who cares? There's nothing I can do about it, but whatever.
If you were not an anarchist, Tom Gaffey, do you think you would still be running the Phoenix Theater 30 years on?
Well, yeah, but see, but that's the problem. It's the same thing. Whenever I hire somebody, I tell them the same damn thing. Watch how I do this. Don't ever run a business like this. 'Cause, I'm a terrible businessman, and there's just no way to do it. I couldn't do anything but kind of
Business
this anarchy
isn't really
style.
anarchy.
Yeah.
It is.
Capitalism is really
Yeah,
They are kind of
does
the
not
antithesis
fit
of
in
each
with
other.
the
Yeah.
whole.
No.
But see, I think the point you make is a valuable one. How, people always ask when you're doing a band or if you're doing a venue, it's like, are you making good money? And like, how much are you getting paid? And that just misses the whole point.
Yes.
Whenever you get that question, it feels like you're being judged and you need to like prove yourself with your response. I don't know if you've ever felt that.
Oh, yeah.
But it's...
And in the same vein of like having to prove yourself in the means that that the society wants you to, in terms of money, in terms of your monetary value, in terms of how much you can make off of it instead of the actual artistic expression of it.
Yeah.
That's definitely a good example of that for sure.
Yeah, and it's very, very on a very, very micro level. The idea of somebody just asking you like, how much money do you make from your band? It's like that's not like
coworkers
huge.
ask you.
That's not huge oppression, but
And our moms
That's
too.
every Christmas dinner.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
your band making any money yet? No.
It's just the idea
guys go
that
on tour again?
Yeah.
But it's like people who are conditioned to think in a certain way, and they don't realize it. They even maybe think that they're being like nice by engaging in conversation.
Right. Oh, yeah.
But it's an ego hit. It can be an ego hit
Yeah.
if you're not secure in what you're doing. Is what
right.
I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Bring it back around as far as seeing more prevalence in like an anarcho movement.
Yeah.
I'd say in the Bay Area we are seeing like a little bit more of that going on, but you got to understand we're in a bubble within a bubble within a bubble, and you can say that with a lot of coastal port cities. We have access to a lot of culture that's not available in the Midwest or some areas of the South. So in those areas, they're still kind of blind to the kind of stuff that we are trying to raise awareness to, and also are making our best effort to practice in our day-to-day lives.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I feel like at this point in time, especially in society, it's like we're at that tip of a break again. And there's more people wanting to like accept and view the anarchist view without even realizing it because they're so upset about what's happening around. And they just don't know how to articulate why they're upset and what's upsetting them, per se, but it's there. And in a lot of places, like you were saying, more like the coastal areas, like obviously the Midwest, like red states stuck in the red state way. But it seems like more red states are kind of going more blue, and people are actually getting more liberal, and that's kind of cool, and everyone's realizing like shit's fucked up and things need to change. They don't necessarily have an answer to the question of like what needs to change, but they know things need to.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that think that they're going blue, but they really are just anti-establishment.
Yeah.
And
Libertarians.
blue can also be pretty established
Yeah, totally.
based too.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's just Ron Swanson to become libertarians moving some
It doesn't need to be, one or the other.
No, definitely not.
Could be anything,
Oh no, it doesn't have to fall on that very traditional
Well, that's
spectrum of
I'm
American
left,
politics.
I'm right. Like,
That's the thing about anarchy. It doesn't
anarchy
have to
isn't
be.
anything
Yeah,
one or the other.
it's what's good for each other.
I think what categorizes it in that for a lot of people is, anarchism is against all oppression. It's anti-fascist, it's anti-racist, it's anti anything that oppresses people. You can't have anarchy unless everyone respects one another.
Which is tough because I think some people hear anarchy and they think that's a scary, lawless
Right,
world
let's go
that I
break
don't want to go to.
windows
And you would say
spray
that's
paint on the
not
wall.
what pure anarchy would be.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so.
I think people have been conditioned to be scared of that notion.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
It's
Absolutely.
As a child, when I heard the word anarchy through school and like through my family, they're like, no, that's like the disrupt of everything. Everything will shut down. Everyone will go crazy and destroy and kill and blah blah blah.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like I was like, no. As I got older, I realized like, no, you're talking about chaos. Chaos and anarchy are different things.
yeah.
In our society, people seem very uncomfortable with like the gradient in between the 2 points. Like there's a lot of discomfort with gender, sexuality, political leanings. People don't really like stuff that isn't this or this. Why are we so afraid of that as a society, do you think?
Because we're told to make a choice from a very early age. We're told from the time we're little kids that we have to choose a career, we have to choose a path to go down, we have to choose who we want to marry, we have to choose what we want to do with our lives from the time we're like babies. And we're conditioned to that by society so much that when a lot of people who aren't exposed to differing ideas or philosophies get older and they feel like they can't make a choice, people often either go one of two ways. They either succumb to that and they succumb to the pressures that society have on them and they make those choices, or they realize this isn't for me. I'm kind of in between. I'm in the middle of a sexual spectrum. I'm in the middle of any kind of spectrum that society would want to put on me, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to make that choice. I feel like that's a big reason, I should say, as to why so many people, especially in modern day America, have a problem swallowing that and swallowing everything that's happening with sexual politics nowadays, everything that's happening with just regular politics too, because people don't understand ambiguity very well, and they don't understand that they don't have to make a particular choice one way or another. They don't have to be left or right. They don't have to be just straight or gay or anything. They can be whatever they want. Human beings are such immense creatures. We have so much inside of us that we can express ourselves with, and there's no need to put ourselves into little boxes. And that scares people. It really scares people.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think people fear people who are different, especially the white conservative American, you know, like they fear people of color. They fear people who express themselves in a different way, they express themselves in their gender. I think that's what causes oppression, is people who fear them, and like, we can't have those people in our society, you know. That's fucking wrong.
They're angry and confused.
Yeah, yeah.
They're scared of it, and that makes them angry. And I think it comes down to like identifying with what kind of team that you're on. You know, I'm on this team.
Yeah.
And that person is on not my team, so fuck them.
I think we experience that a lot in our work too. Is people who look at us and they're like,
They're not on my team.
yeah, what's up with your hair, dude?
Billy Idol's not on my team.
We're desperate to belong to something, and they don't understand when somebody doesn't fit right into that category, and again, it causes them fear, I think, and it makes people who are different, that don't fit into those categories, have fear of being the individual that they are, which is incredibly wrong and fucked up, if you ask me.
Yeah, and you know, I think probably important to state, especially nowadays, that there are plenty of people who have it a lot harder than any of us at this table. Mm-hmm. But we all have our own experiences, and you guys are describing some of them. And I think like the greater point that we're getting at here is society's current swims a certain way. And when you're not swimming with that current, it can be very, very exhausting, regardless of what your life looks like.
Mm-hmm. Our small little complaints about having weird hair and tattoos is nothing compared to like a person of color who actually like goes to a strange place where it's a predominantly white area, and they're getting looked at sideways just because their skin pigment is different than the people in front of them.
Yeah.
So you know, we complain about that, but it's like that is nothing compared to like what other people who.
Yeah.
People of color have to go through on a daily fucking basis.
Not saying like we get the most at all.
By all means, not even close to that.
But both examples of if we lived in the sort of society that you guys talk about, that these issues would not
arise.
They wouldn't arise.
There wouldn't be sexism. There wouldn't be racism, you know. I think the only thing that separates, you know, that is society putting that on people, on women, people of color, you know, that they're different. We're all different. We're all on different teams. Like, we're not. Like, we shouldn't be. Like, what are we fighting fucking wars for how many years now? Like,
all my life.
Yeah. I mean, fuck. Since the beginning of time, people have been fighting, and it doesn't make sense that it needs to really be that way, you know?
Back to the autonomy thing, you want your autonomy and you respect others' autonomy to a certain extent.
It's empathy.
Yeah.
You know?
But see, that's the only way that anarchy can work. Everybody's got to be dependent on to be free with each other and let everybody have their space. And is that possible? Jeez, I don't know.
With 7 billion people on the planet?
Apparently not.
When you have a human element, there's a lot of
It's hard.
margin for error.
It can be said we are animals, but we're not as cool as animals, really.
Oh,
Definitely not.
Damn. Because animals will let you be until dinner time anyway.
Yeah. They'll leave you alone.
You sing a song tonight, perform a song tonight called Domestic.
Mm-hmm.
Anything you want to share about what went into that song in terms of your observation of people acting this way?
That song, it's kind of weird how that song came about, because I was just talking with Mason about this earlier. That song is all about toxic masculinity and abuse, and about how even if it's not necessarily physical, it can often be emotional and verbal abuse. And that's something that we've all experienced in our lives. As men, that's something that, at least a little bit, we've all perpetuated on people that we've loved in our lives in one form or another. Because as men, we're conditioned from a very early age to be dominant and to be not necessarily the oppressors, but the force with which people have to listen to. And that song, those lyrics came out very quickly, and when I wrote them out and I read them, I was kind of disturbed by them, honestly. I was disturbed by what I wrote for myself, and I was talking with Mason earlier about how dark those lyrics are.
yeah.
Initially, it was meant as sort of an abstract kind of examination of an abuser thinking about the abuse that he's perpetuating on his victim in the moment, and how often people who perpetuate those types of abuse don't necessarily even realize that they're doing it, or they don't think that it's as bad as it is. And that's something that I've struggled a lot with in my life, coming from a family that yelled a lot, coming from a family that could get very angry very easily. Not like a physically abusive situation at all, but definitely verbally and sometimes emotionally. And it plays into that whole fantasy of wanting to get revenge on the people that perpetuated those kinds of things on you. That's why the song kind of ends with the abuser grabbing the kitchen knife and at least visualizing taking revenge on their abuser. It's very abstract in that way, in the sense that it's not explicit if it happens or not. But I think that's kind of playing into the idea that people have, that sometimes, oftentimes in situations of abuse, particularly situations of very extreme domestic abuse, they feel like they have no way out. They can't call the cops, because they'll call the cops and then often the police will just not believe the woman's story. And it's not necessarily a woman either. It can be anybody can be the victim of abuse. Especially in a domestic situation, it could be children, men, women, anybody, no matter how you identify. And it's very harrowing to be able to have to come to that realization that violence might be the only way out. And it's terrifying. And I feel like that's really what I was trying to convey with that song.
Any other thoughts from anybody about that song?
Anybody have any other dark thoughts?
Which leads us to another song you played tonight, Lies. Anything you want to share about that song, I think, would be interesting.
That's a song that I wrote as a me. I wrote it initially about one particular person, but I feel like as that song evolved, it took on more just the aspect of how human beings lie so easily, and we lie about the stupidest things. We do it compulsively. It's something that has always fascinated me, frustrated me, and something that I've also dealt with a lot in my own life. When I was a kid, I used to compulsively lie a lot, as kids can tend to do, particularly to their parents, about where they are when they're supposed to be doing something good, but they're not. And that perpetuated itself into my adult life, where I would continue to impulsively lie about things that made no sense. And I didn't need to lie about that. Maybe it was because I wanted somebody to like me. Maybe it was because I just did it. But I find that so much in human suffering. I find that so much in society everywhere. People lie about everything. They lie to be able to build up their own self-esteem. They lie so that they don't bruise their own ego. They lie so that they don't hurt people. But often it ends up hurting people anyway. And that kind of line that we toe of objective truth and moral ambiguity and where is it okay to lie, where is it not okay to lie, those kinds of things have always fascinated me a lot throughout my entire life. And I tried to explore that with that song more and more as I continued to finalize the lyrics on it. Initially, it was just about one person and how I felt like they had lied to me a lot, but it took on a whole new life and a much more bigger theme as I continued to write the lyrics.
And speaking of pattern recognition, I know we're just listing the songs you played tonight, but there's a lot of thought behind them. And not everybody who comes on the show puts as much thought into it, and I appreciate it a lot.
Thank you, Jim.
And this to me is why we do this show.
Yeah.
You're going to play the music later on, but to hear the thoughtfulness that went into it, this is beautiful. So anyway, now that I've justified my rather linear way of questioning here, tell us about pattern recognition, if you wouldn't mind.
Pattern recognition is a lot more abstract. It's a lot more general. I feel it's more just how human beings get into patterns of behavior that they perpetuate throughout their entire lives. Lying's one of them. Patterns of coping mechanisms, dealing with loss, tragedy, sadness, heartbreak. People get on these patterns that they keep going and going over and over again, and they never learn from their mistakes. They never learn their lessons. They never learn how to break that cycle. You could really write all of human history as just kind of like a cycle of bullshit patterns that keep perpetuating themselves over and over again. That song has a lot more of just kind of like a general theme of patterns keep forming right before your eyes, and there's nothing you can do about it. But you can try, and the harder you try, the better you can get at trying to break that cycle. But that's one of the most difficult things you can do in your life, is to be able to break a pattern of behavior that you've had forever. I'm still trying to do that.
I feel like the other song you played tonight, Beautiful World, is a really good sort of final prompt, just that kind of ties everything together we've talked about. But before we do that, I had a question I wanted to ask you. You two play in Redwood, correct?
Formerly.
Yeah. Well, there is a band. There was a band. Is a band called Redwood. There was a show that Redwood played where something really interesting happened, and I was in attendance at it. And I was curious if you wouldn't share it with us, because I thought it was such a moment for this era, this punk scene, etc. You were playing at the Orchard House, and I think there was some moshing, and a member of the crowd commandeered the mic, and it was very fascinating to observe. So I don't want to spoil it, but I'm sure that you've had you experienced it,
yes,
and you have some thoughts about the dynamic and all of that, and just kind of the takeaway from it. So anything you want to share about that? As an audience member, I was like, wow, this is a moment in our current political punk era.
Definitely. That's one of my favorite moments that I've ever had at a show. Maybe my favorite moment of any show I've ever played, because that was an example of somebody taking direct action in that moment to be able to say that they didn't like what was going on, and that they felt threatened by what was going on, and that they felt oppressed, as far as what we've been talking about would be a good word for that. Because moshing is something that has been on the downswing a lot in the punk scene in general for the past few years, because it's a form of expression that can be very dangerous and very violent, and some people just don't like it, and that's something that they have every right to express, and that's something that they have every right to feel. And it was my friend Grae, who I worked with in the city, actually. I worked with her at Whole Foods. She took the mic and basically said her piece of how she just wanted to watch the show and not feel like she was being boxed in by people constantly pushing her over.
Important to note, this was a house show in a living room, so it wasn't a big cavernous space like
No.
the Phoenix. It was, if you were
Quite the
jumping,
opposite.
I mean, I think it was like, what, 10 feet wide, that room, or 15 feet?
Oh, yeah.
Not even.
Not even that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, there's moshing in that space. If you're watching the show, you're going to get affected by it. Important to note. But go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
I
no,
think
go
a couple people took the mic.
They did. As a singer, I get to say my piece all the time, constantly. That's my one job. So any opportunity that I can have to be able to give somebody that microphone and to give them that same voice, I'm game for. Because as I feel very lucky to have been able to play in bands for the past 10 years, that gives me that opportunity. And especially for people who, for more oppressed peoples than me, a cisgendered white male, people of color, women, transgendered people, gay people, anybody who feels like that they want to be able to say their piece in some way, I'll give them the mic. Absolutely. They deserve it more than I do. People like me have been talking into microphones for centuries. Let's give it to somebody else. Let's give it to somebody who's truly oppressed and somebody who can really express that feeling much better than I ever can. I'm good at it, but I'm not that good at it.
And you have one perspective, a perspective. that's been shared
Exactly.
a
I
lot.
just have that one. I have that one extremely dominant perspective.
Yeah.
Anytime I can give a disenfranchised voice that perspective and that platform to be able to say their piece, that makes me feel really good. I feel like that's my goal as a singer, more so than just to entertain people and to be able to, even more so than to be able to express my artistic feelings and to be able to be the center of attention, I guess, to be able to educate people in that way and to be able to empower people that way. That's why I started to be in a band, and that's why I like being a singer too.
Before we wrap up, I would like to talk about Beautiful World. I mean, I less so would like to talk about it than I'd like to hear you talk about it because you wrote it, you guys play it. It's a song that I think sums up a lot of what we've talked about tonight. So anything you
Absolutely.
want to share on that song, I'd love
It's
to
the
hear.
first song we wrote too.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, cool.
It's the
Just
first song
off
we
the
wrote.
fly.
It's the first song I wrote lyrics to. It's really just about people's perceptions on the world around them, and it really does sum up really well what we've been talking about this whole time about how people look outside their window and they perceive something to be one way when it's really another way. And people love to choose a side. They love to feel like they have to be able to fit into a box. People love to believe that the world outside is nothing but flowers and butterflies. But it's terrifying. It's oppressive. It's brutal. The world is brutal. And that song really just kind of encapsulates that feeling that I've always had of, man, it's fucking terrifying out there. We gotta fucking work together. We gotta band together. We have to be empathetic with each other. We have to hold each other up. That's why at the end of the song I put in a Kurt Vonnegut quote, one of my favorite Kurt Vonnegut quotes. It's from, I forget which book it's from. It's from one of his nonfiction books where he's listing out the different rules that we are going to give to babies when they are first born into the world. And one of the ones that he says is, the only thing I know for sure, babies, is, God damn it, you've got to be kind. Really, that's something that I was taught from a very young age and that I still cling to very much so. To a fault. People don't always deserve kindness, but from an initial standpoint, be kind to people. Everybody's fighting a battle. Everybody's struggling. In the world we live in today, everybody's fucking scared. And we have to be kinder to each other, and we have to be able to be more empathetic with each other, and we have to work together. And it's a tough road, and it's a long road, but we'll get there if we do it together. I feel like that's really what the feelings that are encapsulated in that song.
The book was God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater.
That's it.
Written in
Thank you.
1965.
Yeah.
And I don't think that there's any better way that we could end this episode than on that note, because that is the whole point of what we're talking about. It's
Perfectly stated by Mr. Vonnegut, as always.
It's wild out there, but you are doing your part to try to shape the world a little bit in the image that you believe that it should be shaped in.
Bit by bit.
And this project has worked as a vehicle for that and to express those views, and will continue to work in that way. And it's been really a pleasure to sit here at this table and talk to you guys about that.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
For us,
Thank
too.
you. This is
Thank
really
you
cool what
guys
you guys
so
are
much.
doing.
Yeah.
We appreciate it. Yeah.
And now, in just a moment, the band known as B Ward will play a set of this very music for the first time collectively on the stage here at the Phoenix Theater.
Yeah. We should do it again.
So stick around for that. Thank you again so much for joining us, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jim and Tom.
Pee if you got
I've been
to.
holding that for so fucking
Go, Doc, go!
I can't do it.